world is a very scary place at the moment, dangerous place. With our 24/7 news cycle that we've got and the advent of social media, it feels like we are forever being bombarded with news stories about conflicts around the world, terrorist attacks, just things falling apart. Now, being from the UK, we have definitely not avoided the threat of terrorism. It has hit our shores. We've had economic turmoil. We've had some pretty shoddy politicians for as long as I can remember. One thing we've not had is war on our doorstep, and that is something that maybe naively I never thought would be a possibility. For me, the fact that several countries around the world have nuclear weapons, ourselves included, that kind of protected us from some sort of global conflict. That's how I always felt. And I know, as I said, the world is a scary place and there are things happening and we are either directly or indirectly involved in them. But just recently, I've heard a couple of stories that have made me consider, are we heading for war in this country? This made me fearful, I'll be honest. I'm a human being, of course I'm going to be scared by that thought. I'm also a father of 3. I have friends, people who are close to me that I care about deeply. So when I start hearing these things, it does play on my mind. So that's what this evening's episode is going to be about. Just to discuss, are we heading for war? What does it look like? And what could the outcome be? And maybe how did we get to this point in the first place? So this is Stu Know Who. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, like the damn video, and let's get into it. So very recently I heard about a new MI6 chief who are James Bonds, basically. And what she said was, it invoked a lot of fear, I'll be honest, and it didn't feel like, with everything that's going on in the world, that it was strictly just fear mongering. Now, I expect that from politicians, media. This is the MI6 chief. She could be wrong. One can hope. She could be exaggerating. She could be trying to make a name for herself. What I will say is, I heard the story, I read the article, and it's definitely something to talk about. So this is on the BBC. She said, "We are operating in a space between peace and war." New MI6 chief has says, "We're now operating between a space between peace and war," as she laid out the interlocking web of security challenges that the service is working to tackle. Now, one thing I will say, she could be pushing for more money, more money for the agency or whatever. That's also a possibility. So Blaze Metro Welly's Apologies if I've butchered that name. But first public speech since taking a role focused on the multifaceted threat posed by Russia, which she said was testing us in the grey zone with tactics that are just below the threshold of war. She also highlighted the menace of an aggressive, expansionist and revisionist Russia, while referring to the war in Ukraine, insisting the UK would maintain pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin on Ukraine's behalf. She was the first woman to head it. I don't care. I heard this and it genuinely, knowing full well what Russia has in its arsenal, what we have in our arsenal, and how politicians of all description say what they need to because they think it benefits them or their parties rather than necessarily the wider country. At least that's how it appears for a lot of them. It scares me. So she continued to say it's important to understand their attempts to bully, fearmonger and manipulate because it affects us all. This is a conflict that has gone on since 2022. Actually, going back further, Russia took Crimea in 2014, and there were no, as far as I can see, no ramifications for Russia, but also no real explanations from our media, from our politicians, why this happened in the first place. This is a conflict that I'm very anti-interventionist, unless it is a direct threat to ourselves, and I'm sorry if that sounds selfish. We need to first and foremost make sure that our country is safe, our borders are safe, which we are severely lacking at the moment. We need to put ourselves first. We can't be the world police. I know that is, let's be clear, America is the world police. We are the world police's little bitch. I don't like that. The first person I ever voted for, and I am fully behind the importance of voting, having your voice heard. And the first person I voted for was Tony Blair. I thought he was brilliant. Who led us into what has transpired to be an illegal war in Iraq and helped create a lot of this chaos that we are still struggling through now. I don't want to see us interfering. I don't want to see bad people, and let's be clear, Vladimir Putin is an evil piece of crap. But Ukraine, and this is nothing against Russian people, Ukrainian people, they're all the same as us in regards to they are viewed by what their governments do. I don't want anyone making an accusation or assumption about me based on what our leaders do. But Ukraine, prior to 2022, was known as a very corrupt country. I'm not justifying what Putin did, not at all. But from the outside looking in, it just seems like a bad guy versus worst guy. Putin being the worst. We have spent so much money trying to support Ukraine, and in all honesty, I hope Ukraine defend themselves. I hope they defend their borders. I do find it slightly ironic that we are more focused on the borders of another country than we are of our own. That does crack me up a little bit. But that's, to sound callous, someone else's issue, in my opinion. And this isn't burying my head in the sand. This is, I've heard so many people saying that Poland will be next. So what did Poland do? They reinvested in their army. They built up and said, try me. We've not. We've sent everything to Ukraine and said, let your boys and girls die so we don't have to. That's pretty shitty in my opinion. We should have been, I'm not saying not support the Ukraine, but we should have been building up our own stockpiles, our own armed forces and everything like that. But we didn't. We thought someone else would fight for us. And we did all of that because our politicians are so intelligent, so clever. They thought that Russia wouldn't see us supplying them with weapons, with finances, with soldiers. We've, in the past week or so, it was news that a British soldier died in Ukraine. But we're not involved. We're just supplying the weapons. Well, it turns out we've actually got personnel on the ground too. Now, one thing I always thought is, if someone was smashing my windows, throwing bricks through them, and I went outside to confront them, and it was my neighbour doing it, and the guy down the road was giving him the bricks, you best believe I'd have a fucking problem with both of them. But because we're not firing the weapons, we're not involved. Now, it seems to me that maybe I'm being naive. I probably am. But surely some sort of diplomacy is better than thousands and thousands and thousands of people dying on all sides. Where is the off-ramp? It's a genuine question. Where is the off-ramp? Because at the moment it seems that there's only a thought of escalation, and eventually that leads us to being involved in a conflict that I'm sure no one wants on their doorstep. I don't want that. Now, to pull up an article from Sky News, which is basically talking about potentially what could be on our doorstep. So the article is titled, "Get Ready to Fight. Armed Forces Chief issues stark warning as Russia threat grows." Great. Bloody great. In an extraordinarily blunt intervention, Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Knighton warned that Russia's military strength is increasing and is something to fear, with Russian troops now battle-hardened after spending the past nearly 4 years waging a full-scale war in Ukraine. And whilst they're doing that, we are not investing in ours, as well as shafting our farmers. So we're going to have food shortages even without this going on. Genius. Absolutely genius. So there is a growing risk that Russia could attack the UK, and the nation's sons and daughters need to be ready to fight. The head of Britain's armed forces has said, "I will be on the front line to fight for my daughters." Right behind Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch and whoever else from whatever party. There used to be a time when leaders of countries would lead their soldiers into war. So if our leaders do that, I'll be right behind them. I don't see many takers in the Houses of Parliament, to be honest. In an extraordinary, blunt intervention, Air Chief... I've just read that one. Apologies. So, he said the UK's armed forces would always be the first line of defence alongside the rest of the NATO alliance, but the whole of society must also play a part in rebuilding resilience. Okay, I would say the whole of society has already played a huge part, because the reason no one's got any money is because all of our money is being given to another country to defend itself. Do not let that be forgotten. The chief of the defence staff said it's important to be honest with families and households across the UK about what it means to be prepared for an array of real physical threats. What a lovely episode to be doing just before Christmas. He said the UK sons and daughters must be ready. Serving up a sombre reality check, Air Chief Marshal Knighton said he agreed with his French counterpart, General Fabien Mandon, who said last month that France must be ready for the possibility of losing its children in a potential war with Russia. Now, going back, I'm pretty sure we were told the reason we are funding Ukraine is because if we don't, we will be fighting this war. We have funded them, and now they're prepping us to be fighting this war. Again, I'll go back to diplomacy. I'm 100% not taking Russia's side, because nothing against the Russian citizens, but fuck Putin. You know what I mean? If I die in a Novichok attack, you know where it's come from. I have no allegiance to that country at all. But I'm sorry to say, I feel for Ukraine, I do. But I don't see why that is our country's problem. We have, prior to this happening, we had no strategic military pact with Ukraine. Russia was 100% in the wrong. 100%. And I feel for Ukraine. I genuinely do, and I'm all for sending food packages and helping in any way we can. But when the bear is attacking, if you keep poking him, at some point he's going to come and attack you. Which was always how I felt about this. Now, I suppose by saying that, I'm probably a Russian apologist, because that's what they like to label you with. But there's that many labels being thrown about now by anyone who has an opinion. It kind of just bounces off me. I don't care. It's my opinion. It's my thoughts, my feelings. And it is what it is. So he continued to say, the situation is more dangerous than I have known during my career. and the price of peace is rising. Our response needs to go beyond simply strengthening our armed forces. It needs a whole of nation response that builds our defence industrial capacity. Surely that would include not screwing farmers over so we can feed ourselves. We're spectacularly failing on that. Surely it would include protecting our borders so we know who is coming into this country and whether they could pose a threat. We are spectacularly failing on that. But I'm expecting to send my daughters to fight. Other people are expecting to send their sons and daughters. He continued, we need to grow the skills we need, harness the power of the institutions we'll need in wartime, i.e. farming, and ensures and increases the resilience of society and the infrastructure that supports it. He continued, sons and daughters, colleagues, veterans will all have a role to play, to build, to serve, and if necessary, to fight. And more families will know what sacrifice for our nation means. I am immensely proud to wear my poppy. I know people who have been in our armed forces, and although they won't accept it, I always label them as heroes, whether they saw active conflict or not. The fact that they were prepared to put themselves in that position, heroes. How do we treat our military veterans now? Homeless, drug addictions, not cared about. I care about them generally. To me though, the way that our veterans are treated in this country is a disgrace, a national disgrace, and one we should hang our heads in shame for. It doesn't feel very appealing or inviting, the way that our guys are treated afterwards, with an air of suspicion around them. Soldiers are now being investigated for things that happen in Northern Ireland and stuff. And look, war is war. It's horrible. It's disgusting. I've never been in a war. I don't wish to be. I was going to say that's why I never joined the armed forces. I actually came very close. It was, I wanted to get into engineering, and it was, I was looking for an engineering job, and I came very close to joining the forces so that I could train, so I could pursue engineering, but also so I could serve my country. I thought that was so noble. Now, the reason I didn't was Iraq happened and I disagreed with it. I went into a different field of engineering and that's where I went. If Iraq had not have happened, I'd probably still be in the armed forces now. They are the best of us. The people who give the armed forces the orders from the comfort and safety of their offices or bunkers, if it comes to that, I definitely do not think that they are the best of us. I do not think they have the best of intentions, and if they do, then I don't think they're very fucking bright. So to go back to Russia, because that is In World War II, it was the Germans. Today, it is Russia. Russia are our focus. The boogeyman. Boogeyman, someone that dances. They are our bogeyman. Now, this article is on Politico. And this is the 5 doomiest Russia warnings from Britain's military chiefs. So the article continues, the flurry of interventions comes at a crunch time for Ukraine peace talks as UK defence spending plans are drawn up too late. This should have been done a long time ago. This should have been done under the previous government and the previous government before them. So London, the UK's top military brass are not pulling their punches with a flurry of interventions in recent weeks, warning just how stark the threat from Russia is for Europe, well beyond Ukraine's borders. British military chiefs have been hammering home just what is at stake as European leaders gather in Berlin for the latest round of talks, hoping to break the stalemate in peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. They have also been speaking out as the Ministry of Defence and UK Treasury hammer out the details of a landmark investment plan for defence. So here are the 5 most striking warnings about the threats from Russia. Russia's export of chaos will continue. So intelligence chief Blaise, what's that name again? Matrewelli called out the acute threat posed by an aggressive, expansionist and revisionist Russia. The export of chaos is a feature, not a bug, in the Russian approach to international engagement, and we should be ready for this to continue until Putin is forced to change his calculus. Putin should be in no doubt our support is enduring. The pressure we apply on Ukraine's behalf will be sustained. Number 2, Britain won't rule the waves without working for it. Navy boss Gwyn Jenkins used a conference in London last week to draw attention to the rising threat of an underwater attack. How lovely. The advantage that we have enjoyed in the Atlantic since the end of the Cold War and the Second World War is at risk. We're holding on, but not by much, Britain's top sea lord said. There is no room for complacency. Our would-be opponents are investing billions. We have to step up or we will lose that advantage. Number 3, spy games everywhere. UK Defence Secretary John Healey called reporters to Downing Street last month to condemn the deeply dangerous entry of a Russian spy ship, the Yantar, into UK waters. Britain deployed a Royal Navy frigate and Royal Air Force P-8 planes to monitor and track the vessel, Healey said. After detailing the incursion, the UK Cabinet Minister described it as a stark reminder of the new era of threat. Our world is changing, it's less predictable and more dangerous, he said. Number 4, no way out. Healey's deputy Al Carnes followed up with his own warning last week that Europe must be prepared for war on its doorstep. Europe is not facing wars of choices anymore, but wars of necessity, which will come with a huge, high human cost, Khan said, citing Russia's invasion of Ukraine as an example. Number 5. Everyone's got to be ready to step up, which I've just read. UK Chief of Defence Staff Richard Knighton is set to call on Monday for the whole nation to step up as the Russian threat to NATO intensifies. The war in Ukraine shows Putin's willingness to target neighbouring states, including their civilian populations, potentially with such novel and destructive weapons, threatens the whole of NATO, including the UK. The situation is more dangerous than I have known during my career, and the response requires more than simply strengthening our armed forces. I read that on the previous article. Look, as I already said, Putin is to blame for this. Russia, as a military force, are to blame for this. But where is the off-ramp? We have spent the last 3 years nobly, I would say, supporting Ukraine, opening our homes to Ukrainian refugees, and as I said, these people did not want war. But I would also say neither did the Russian people. This is a political argument, a political conflict. And nobody seems to be, I don't hear talk of an off-ramp. All I hear is this is done with Russia's complete defeat and them rebuilding and blah de blah de blah. On what planet is that going to happen? And to me, the only way you force that to happen in Russia risks leaving us without a planet. I'm not a guy for being scared, and I myself personally, I lift weights, you know, I do a bit of boxing, stuff like that, and I like to think I can take care of myself, not because I want to go out starting trouble, but you never know what's going to happen. You need to be able to look after yourself. But at the same time, if a dude stepped to me who was 6'8", 300 pound, I don't think I'd be saying let's go. Where is the off-ramp? What is the next step? What is the end to this war? What prevents this war spreading beyond Ukraine? What prevents this war spreading to Poland or Sweden or wherever it may be that is an EU country that then forces us into a position where we have to defend? I want peace. And I know peace and strength. If you want peace, prepare for war. We've not done that for so long that our armed forces, I heard the other day, fact check me on this, but we have less soldiers now than we did during, was it the Napoleonic Wars? How have we got to that state? We've relied on the fact that since World War II, people don't go to war. There are wars all over the world. More so than there used to be. We've relied on the fact that we have a nuclear deterrent. Unfortunately, no one cares about our nuclear deterrent, or should I say, Russia doesn't care about our nuclear deterrent. They've got more than us. And it's become a bit of a dick measuring contest, you know what I mean? With a let's go, stop me. Do you know, we've had nuclear weapons on the planet since the end of World War II. The US dropped 2 nukes on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that is what finally convinced Japan to surrender. That was a long time ago. the advancements that have been made in nuclear weapons, you'd think would scare everyone into peace, including Russia. But it's not. I don't know whether it's psychosis or something, but it's we don't want war. We don't. Because millions and millions and millions, if not billions, of people will perish. That's my children. And anyone saying that, we must win at all cost, to me, only leads us to losing ultimately. Now, I've don't know if this is, whether you call this a fun tool. It's the nuke map. So nuclearsecrecy.com/nuke map. Now I've got this centered on London. Now what you can do here is select from certain places around the world. Obviously I'm in the UK, so I'm going to go for London, just to show the carnage and the devastation that one nuclear weapon can do. So let's have a look through what we got. Fat Man. That was what landed on Nagasaki. So click on that one and let's detonate. And let's see where we go. Let's see what carnage and devastation this causes. 3, 2, 1, boom. Now I don't know London that well, but just from the centre of London, that is huge. So does it say on here? Trying to see what the rings mean. So there we go. Effect distance for a 20 kiloton airburst. So the one in the middle, maximum size of nuclear fireball. Relevance to damage on the ground depends on the height of detonation. If it touches the ground, the amount of the radiation fallout is significantly increased. Anything inside the fireball is effectively vaporized. The red one on the outer one. Heavily built concrete buildings are severely damaged or demolished. Fatalities approach 100%. The green zone. 500 rem ionizing radiation dose, likely fatal in about 1 month. 15% of survivors will eventually die of cancer as a result. Then you got the one outside of that. Most residential buildings collapse. Injuries are universal. Fatalities are widespread. The chances of a fire starting in commercial and residential damage are high, and buildings so damaged are at risk of spreading fire. Then we've got the thermal radiation radius. 3rd degree burns extend through the layers of skin and are often painless because they destroy the pain nerves. This can cause severe scarring or disablement and can require amputation. And there is a 100% probability of 3rd degree burns. And then you've got the last one. Look how wide that is. Glass windows can be expected to break. This can cause many injuries in a surrounding population who come to a window after seeing the flash of a nuclear explosion. So that is on what landed on Nagasaki. Now I'm going to go to the other extreme. I'm going to go to the largest one ever tested. And then actually I'm going to do one more after that. The largest one ever designed. Both are Russian. Okay. So 3, 2, 1. Boom. Goodbye, Southeast. That is I don't want this shit landing near me. And you know, looking at the map, I'm not that far from Plymouth. Plymouth has a large naval base. We have got a lot of military bases around the southwest. I don't want this. Nobody wants this. Surely we need cooler heads to prevail. So the fireball radius is 5.16 kilometers. The heavy blast, where you're gonna die, 8.91. Moderate blast, 20.7 kilometers. The light damage radius, 54.3. Thermal radiation radius, 60 kilometers. That's the largest one ever tested. Let's try the largest one ever designed. Make sure we all sleep well tonight. 3, 2, 1. This is landing on London and as far up as Cambridge, as far across as Newbury, Basingstoke. This is, so the entire radius, 91.8 kilometers. Surely we need to get in a room. We need to have a form of diplomacy. Now, the one thing the UK's always had on its side is the fact that our closest and greatest ally historically has been the US. I would say at the moment, relations with the US are strained, close but strained. We have, I'm not gonna get into a debate about whether you love him or hate him, but Donald Trump is a Marmite figure, not only amongst civilians in this country, but politicians in this country also. And some of the people in in our cabinet right now have said some things about Donald Trump in the past that if I was him and people were saying that, I wouldn't want to work with him. There are huge ideological differences, chasms. World War II, we eventually had the US on our side to come and help us. It took, if I remember my history right, it took post Pearl Harbor for the US to actually fully get involved in World War II. If they hadn't have done, who knows? They are the biggest military in the world, and it's like having a big brother who's a brick shithouse, you know what I mean? And having that guy backing you up. even to go back to Trump's first period as president, he called out a lot of NATO members, ourselves included, for basically riding on the coattails of America while they do the majority of the funding for NATO. Goes back to what I've said previously on this episode. We have underfunded our military and taken it for granted for too long. Hope for peace but prepare for war, and that's not what we've done. And it's left us in a position where we are weak, and whether you like what's going on in America right now, we desperately fucking need them. We also have people who have made it so that they might not be chomping at the bit to come and help us. On top of that though, America have their own problems. They have their own conflicts that are going on around the world that are perhaps more pressing on them than Europe right now. And that's a sad state of affairs that one of our allies, we are questioning, would they have our back? For all of our sakes, I fucking hope they do. But to highlight what I mean, this is the Council of Foreign Relations, and this is to read the article: Middle East conflict, Russia-Ukraine war, and US-Venezuela tensions are top of the US security concerns for 2026. So, the United States is reducing its efforts to prevent war and violence, while the level of armed conflict around the world and the risk to the United States continues to increase, argues the annual Preventative Priorities Survey produced by the Council on Foreign Relations. This year, over 600 American foreign policy experts deemed 5 conflict-related scenarios as highly likely to emerge or escalate and to have an impact on the US interests. So, experts are most concerned about conflict-related risks in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, including the potential for increased clashes between Israeli security forces and Palestinians in the West Bank, renewed fighting in the Gaza Strip, and intensified attacks in the Russia-Ukraine war, the possibility of direct US military strikes in Venezuela, and of an increased political violence and popular unrest in the US are similarly worrying scenarios. Experts further warn of renewed armed conflict between Iran and Israel. A disruptive artificial intelligence enabled a cyber attack on the US infrastructure and cross-strait crisis between China and Taiwan. So, according to them, there's a lot on their bloody radar. Now, to go to Taiwan and China, Xi Jinping has said Taiwan will be China. He's been very clear. Now, this is on DW. Taiwan eyes bigger military budget to counter China threats. With China ramping up its military posturing towards Taiwan, Taipei is preparing to boost its own combat readiness. Will the opposition-dominated parliament approve the new defence spending plan? China is not backward in coming forward about its intentions for Taiwan. It views Taiwan as Chinese. To go into history, there was a communist takeover, and the government that was in charge at the time fled to Taiwan. Taiwan will consider themselves the real China, the real government of China. It's messy. It's very messy, but one thing I will say is the US has always said, in a roundabout way, it will protect Taiwan. China have said they will take Taiwan. So that's going to pull our biggest military ally in another direction. You've got the Korean Peninsula as well, that are technically still at war. The US have, I should have pulled up numbers, but the US has soldiers in South Korea. They will defend South Korea. Then there's the chaos that's been going on in the Middle East. Now, this article here, Iran, who are no friends to the West, aims to fire 2,000 missiles at once in future conflict, Israel warns. Lovely. Tehran is rebuilding its missile arsenal at high speed after the 12-day conflict with Israel, aiming to fire 2,000 missiles at once in future escalations, Israeli officials and analysis warn. US and ourselves are allies with Israel. And that's been talked about as well. All these conflicts going on, we are spread so thin already with our lack of military investment. We've basically been there with our scrounging plate out, hoping that the Yanks will bail us out. And that's just the truth of the matter. And the last one that they spoke about was what's going on in America and Venezuela. This is a new one, and one that I'm sure not a lot of people saw coming. But warship submarines and Tomahawk missiles, how the US is preparing for a possible war with Venezuela. Do you think they give a damn what we're doing right now? That's a genuine question. There is a very real chance that should a hot war break out between ourselves and Russia, or NATO and Russia, we might be doing this without the US. The US may be pulled into many different directions. The president of the US has already highlighted the fact that we have not been spending what we should do on defense. He's not been shy about his disappointment, shall we say, or anger about how we are not funding what we should do. We're in a position where, to go back to again, I've said it already, where's the fucking off-ramp? Like, at some point, you just hope these politicians put their pin dicks away and their rulers away, stop dick measuring, and actually have a conversation. Because who's going to suffer while these politicians are hiding in their bunkers. It's going to be you and I. It's going to be my family, your family. I wish cooler heads will prevail, but as it stands at the minute, I can't see it. And that scares the shit out of me, because it just seems to be, it's like a snowball rolling downhill, you know. It's just getting worse and worse, and there's no stopping it. Now, one last article I want to quickly just bring up. And this doesn't surprise me, but it does maybe highlight part of the issue that we have. This is from The Standard. Half of Britons would not fight for their country under any circumstances today. Now, it's a few months old. It comes ahead of the 80th anniversary of VE Day. Nearly half of Britons say they would refuse to fight for their country under any circumstances, according to a new Ipsos survey that suggests patriotism may be waning ahead of VE Day commemorations. Just 35% of respondents said they would be willing to take up arms in time of war, while 48% said there were no conditions under which they would go to war for Britain, and a further 17% said they were unsure how they would respond. That is either a damning indictment of the civilians of this country, or maybe it's to be expected with how, for the last however many years, we have been taken for granted, ignored, lied to by the people who are supposed to lead us. Myself personally, I love this country. There are rights in this country that are worth fighting for, such as free speech, which is under attack, such as the right for a trial by a jury, which is being taken away, which is security, which is being eroded. And it seems, just my opinion, that this country feels like it's been being destroyed from within. So that poll doesn't shock me. We used to rule like 80% of the world. We can't rule ourselves anymore. And that is a sad state of affairs. I hope and I pray every night that there is an off-ramp. I've used that term a few times. I hope there's an off-ramp. I hope there is some sort of pause and thought and conversation had that prevents us diving headfirst into World War III. But I would argue at the moment that politicians of all parties are not the best of us. Yet they are the ones who have to make these decisions. I fear for my kids. I've had a pretty decent life to now. My kids are just starting theirs, and I'm entrusting their future to these fucking clowns. But that's just my opinion. What do I know? Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. But I think it's important to talk about. I think it's important to ask more of our politicians. Maybe get some tins of food. I know I've been stocking up some pasta and stuff, bottled water, battery chargers, because hopefully we don't need it. But if a cyber attack comes, maybe if there's just a bad storm, it's handy to have something for a week or so just to tide you over. That's what I'm doing. You know, I got a pantry and there's quite a few bits in there should I need it. Not long term, because I don't live in a mansion, unfortunately. And I definitely don't have a bunker. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap up there. That was a cheery episode. I hope everyone's feeling all fluffy and warm inside now. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell. Thank you so much for watching. Like the damn video, and unless something bad happens in the meantime, I'll see you next time.